So, Lone Rider here, and I want to talk about shooting, but I don't want to talk about shooting bows. I want to talk about shooting pistols. About a year ago, a friend of mine gave me the opportunity to go to a shooting range. We put several hundred rounds through a 1911 handgun, and I had a grand old time. It was great fun. It was awesome. I walked out of there thinking, man, I got to get myself one of these. And then reality set in, and I was like, well, I live in New Jersey, where they're always talking about taking people's guns away and making the laws more and more and more strict. And yeah, do I want to sink that kind of money into a hobby where the general political attitude in the state I live is, let's outlaw the dang things? Seriously. And that's pretty sad when, you know, the main function of a government policy is to discourage people from participating in a hobby or an interest or an activity that they might enjoy, to say nothing of, you know, discouraging them from exercising their constitutional rights. But that's a bit of a digression. I didn't really want to make this about gun control. I wanted to make this about airsoft guns, and that's what this is. This is an airsoft copy of a Colt 45. Before I went to the shooting range, I have known a great deal about firearms all my life. I've read about them. I've taken apart dummy ones in some cases in my youth, but I'd never fired one before. And I felt that my knowledge of the 1911 pistol, in terms of its history, its development, blah, 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 exceeded my practical hands-on experience, which is literally none, right? I knew a great deal about it, but it was all theory, no practice. And my concern was I didn't want to go in there for the very first time, pick up a live firearm, and not be comfortable with it in my hand. Yes, as it turned out, the range had, as most of these places do, very good safety protocols. They had a very good way of explaining everything to you, and they certainly, there was no question of that there was always somebody there to help if you needed it, and that they started you off carefully with the firearm and all of that. Yes, I would have been perfectly safe if I went in there sight unseen and had never tried anything first. But I would have been very self-conscious and maybe a little bit concerned about looking a fool. So what I did is I got my hands on one of these airsoft pistols. And there's a variety of these. They all fire these little 6mm pellets. Plastic pellets at fairly low velocities, usually under 400 feet per second. This particular one is the KWA PTP MKIII. The PTP stands for Professional Training Pistol. It's marketed as a practice tool for when someone can't get down to the range, or for so-called force-on-force practice where people, you know, shoot each other like you would in a paintball game or an airsoft match. And this particular one is powered by green gas, which is essentially like propane without the stink. It goes in the bottom of the magazine. A little valve at the back lets it interface with the gun. The little BBs go in the front. And the advantage of these airsoft guns is that they essentially duplicate all the functions of the firearm. And they're not static functions in terms of it's not just a molded dummy gun where you have a slide release and a safety, but they're just molded onto the frame. These things all work. The magazine release works. The slide stop works. The thumb safety works. In this case, it's an ambidextrous one. The hammer works. The grip safety functions, etc. And certain parts, the guide rod for the spring, the hammer are steel. In this particular case, the hammer is steel. It has to be because it's skeletonized just like a real one would be on this type of gun. If they made it out of cast aluminum or something and they made it in that shape and that thickness, it would probably break. So now there are other types of airsoft guns. Some use a CO2 canister in the magazine. There are also other brands that use the green gas. But in this particular case, what I like about this one is the fit and finish is way above the rest. The sharpness of the checkering, the way everything fits together, there appears to be less slop, less tolerance issues. Everything just feels better made. And that's nowhere near evident than when you're dealing with the action of the airsoft gun. The trigger pull on this is what it should be. A 1911 is a gun that is a single action mechanism, which means the hammer has to be cocked each time you fire it, whether by the slide going back or whether by you pulling the trigger. And just in case you couldn't see that, let me do a little bit of a close-up. That's the amount of trigger pull you get. There's no slack. When it's cocked and you start pressing the trigger, right there is the wall. And then you pull the trigger very slightly, and the action breaks, and the hammer comes forward. There are other airsoft guns. I have a CO2 powered one. I have another 1911 that uses green gas. The CO2 has a little more kick, and some people say it performs better in terms of speed of the pellets. For practice, I guess the main thing would be, if you're using it to practice for a real firearm, is that the CO2 has more kick, so it's more like the recoil of a real gun. This may not have as much kick, but what it does have is that really crisp trigger pull. Right? This is just, oh, that's beautiful. And it does have a little bit of kick. Right? It does have a little bit of kick. I'm going to hold the slide stop down since this is empty. There's no BBs in it. I don't want to shoot up my basement. Now it's out of gas. But yeah, it does have a little bit of kick, and you see the slide does reciprocate and then go back, chamber to next round, cock the hammer, etc. So in that sense, it's very much like a real one in terms of all the features and functions and etc. And in that sense, it was very good practice for me. People have talked about the usefulness and the versatility of these as a training analog for actual firearms. Some people say it sucks, don't do it, it's a waste of time. Other people say it's quite useful. Some people say it's middling. I honestly don't know. That was my only experience firing the real thing. I haven't got back to the range because it's just too goddamn expensive. Schedules with the friends I would go with don't quite match up. The range is far away. And again, you're talking a couple $100 if you have a bunch of people go to shoot. You got to rent the range time, rent the guns, buy the bullets, and yada yada. Whereas something like this, it costs virtually nothing to shoot, right? You've got a canister of green gas, which is what, maybe 10, 12 bucks. And the BBs, which last pretty much forever. You know, I had, like I said, with the safety protocols the range followed, I would have been perfectly safe going there and never having done anything on my own first. But I just felt less self-conscious and more comfortable having handled one of these and gotten to the point where I actually, because they disassemble similar to the way a real one does, I could actually work the thing and, you know, put the magazine in, work the action, set the safety with my eyes closed. And in fact, at one point I disassembled it sitting in my easy chair with my eyes closed. So, you know, it just made me a lot more comfortable with where everything was and with what all the parts did and how it felt in the hand and so on and so forth. It also made me comfortable with the idea that you're going to have moving metal parts going like this right in front of your face. I mean, I shoot a bow all the time, which is an actual weapon, unlike an airsoft gun. But the thing about the bow is it's quiet and everything is moving away from you. You don't have any moving parts slamming back towards you. So in some ways, this really did help make me feel a little more comfortable going into it. Less like a total noob. You know, that I'm not sure you can quantify the importance of how, you know, being comfortable handling a weapon, but I would argue that that is important, more so than just the, you know, the objective idea of is the range safe and their instructors encourage safety and so on and so forth. This is, do you feel comfortable doing it, right? I mean, granted, the people at the range want you to be comfortable. They want to attract new people to the sport or activity or whatever. just like anything else, I mean, if you go to an archery range and you say, I want to try archery, they'll do whatever they can to make you feel comfortable trying it because they want more people to get into it. But with something that's loud and that has, moving parts slamming back and forth in your face, it's a little different. So I wanted to be a little more comfortable with that in hand. Now it turned out they talked me into firing the 9mm version when they found out I was a noob shooter, which was fine. I didn't notice the recoil once I got used to it to speak of with the 9mm. The 45 might have been a bit of a big thing to start with. Mostly what I noticed is, whereas this has a little bit of kick, it's all from the mass of the slide going back. True recoil is from the mass of an object leaving the barrel. Well, these things are like 0.2 grams, so they have literally very little mass. Essentially, they don't weigh anything. I mean, I guess in a technical sense, yes, they have mass. They weigh 0.2 grams. But compared to a bullet, yeah. So this doesn't have recoil in the proper sense. It has a little bit of simulated recoil from the slide going back. That's pretty much it. So I noticed that instead of just this clack and this thing moving a little bit, there was actual recoil. But it wasn't something that really, after my first shot, I was like, okay, so that's what the recoil is like. And then it was, just as you do. That's what so, yeah, it doesn't help you really practice for that. But on the other hand, the recoil of a 9mm is not bad, right? Now the 45, by the time we got to the 45, me and my friend had fired a couple hundred rounds through the 1911 in 9mm. They brought out a 45, and it was some highfalutin fancy. It was not a Wilson. It was a Cabot Arms or something. It was some fancy thing, really, really high end. And they brought out a couple rounds of 45, and me and my friend shot those. And that wasn't that bad, because by that time I was used to the idea of recoil, used to the idea of noise. We had hearing protectors, of course. And used to the concept of the spent brass flying across my field of vision, because, of course, I'm a lefty. So, these things eject on this side, and that's one thing an airsoft gun doesn't do, is eject spent brass. I mean, they make shell-ejecting airsoft guns, but they're extremely uncommon. So, yeah, this was great practice. I benefited from it in terms of feeling more comfortable. And since, it's also made for great plinking around the house. Hopefully, when I do get back to the range, which I do intend to do, I will have, I won't be any worse than last time, because I will have at least been practicing with this in the interim, in addition to whatever hand-eye coordination translates from archery. And, one of these things that makes these great for plinking around the house, just to use an example, is you can shoot them where you can't shoot a real gun, right? I mean, most people where they live, they can't shoot a real gun in their house. It's illegal, it's loud, and it's dangerous. Whereas one of these, if you set up an indoor range in your garage, or your basement, or a barn, or, I wouldn't recommend doing it, let's say, in your backyard if you have neighbors. But if you have a big fence, or you have your woods in your backyard or something, yeah, right. I mean, generally speaking, don't take these outside. They could be confused for a real gun, yada, yada. Public safety announcement over. But the point is, if you have if you're in your house, I could set up a range here in the basement, for example, with small targets, as long as I had something to stop the pellets from bouncing around. And, yeah, could somebody theoretically peer in my windows and be like, oh my God, he's got a gun, and jump to the wrong conclusions? Maybe, but then the question becomes, what the heck are they doing on my lawn and next to my house peering in my window? Not the fact that I'm safely practicing with an airsoft gun in my basement. And that's again, you can, as long as you don't do it outside where it might freak somebody out, you can shoot these where you can't shoot an actual firearm, such as at home. So if you did want to practice, in between trips to the range, or if you couldn't afford to get down to the range, or it's too far away, or like me, you were a noob shooter and you just wanted to familiarize yourself with the firearm before going to the range the first time, and then just as a side effect, you were stuck with the pistol, and you're like, well, what do I do with this? Sell it on Craigslist or use it for plinking, and it's great fun for plinking. So, yeah, get yourself one of these if you're, thinking about shooting and you just want to practice first, or, you know, you want to practice between range visits, or they're just fun to plink with, right? You know, it's practice I wouldn't be getting in otherwise. Right? There are people who, like I said, debate the effectiveness of these for practicing for real firearm use. I can't speak to that because I have very limited experience with real firearm use. But what I can speak to is that they're very fun to practice with, and using it before I went to the shooting range for the first time did make me feel less self-conscious and more comfortable with the weapon in hand. And like I said, it's kind of hard to, you can quantify safety. You can't really quantify being comfortable with a weapon, but that's just as important in my opinion, because it's, you know, whether you enjoy the experience and go back is not going to come down to just how safe was it. Obviously, if somebody gets shot in the foot, nobody's going to want to do it again. But it's a question of, did you enjoy it? And part of that is being comfortable with it. And so this helped me be comfortable right off the bat with that gun. And I think that's pretty cool. So 2 messages here. Don't do like I did and wait till you're in your 30s to fire a gun for the first time. It's fun. You should try it. You know, the earlier, the sooner, the better, right? And the second thing is, if you do want to avoid feeling like such a noob, these things make great practice, and they also make great for plinking around the house. So, Lone Rider out. Rock on. Stay safe.